All right, today I want to talk to everybody about using a full range of value in your drawings. So these are examples of past exercises we did just shading spheres. This is graphite over here, charcoal, mostly charcoal pencils on this side. All I wanted to show was the demonstration that what really starts to give us the sense of depth in a drawing and actual believable roundedness and dimension would be using a pretty close to a full range of value. Now these are maybe not polished as well as they could be, but what they do both do a good job of is to show your highlight, the white of the page, light grays, medium grays, getting into that deeper dark range, some extreme darks here, almost jet black here, and everything in between, right? And that's what starts to give us that sense of a rounded object. So this exercise today will be all about using or creating a value scale for ourselves. Let me zoom in on this. All right, so a value scale is a tool that we artists can use. It's really kind of a training tool for us, and it's a reminder of just how many values there are, how many stair steps there are in this process. And it's good for any of you who maybe aren't used to shading. Sorry, just trying to position this a little bit better, guys. Anybody who's not used to shading, if you're new to it, it can take a while to really get that feel for just how dark can I get these pencils or this charcoal to go. How can I control the mid-tones? So that's what this is all about today. Now in your sketchbooks, you guys can do this too. I made a what's a 9-step value scale. So there are 9 squares in a row. You can measure this out for yourself. Mine are 3/4 of an inch blocks. You could do 1-inch blocks just to make it easier if you wanted to. You don't absolutely have to measure it out, but I find that it helps to keep this clean and just to kind of keep me on track, make the edges nice. So let's do graphite first, and then we'll do charcoal pencils because we want to get some practice in both of those materials when it comes to shading. So graphite up top. I have these numbered. 1 is going to be white, 9 is going to be black, as dark as I can get, and 5 I've circled because that'll be our true, like, kind of middle gray is what we'll try to get. So I've got my darkest pencil, my 6B, and that's what I'm going to use for my black tone. I'm going to lay that in, and then we'll have white and black to compare to. All right, now I'm pushing pretty hard, bearing down on this pencil because we want this to be as jet black as possible. So you want to cover any of those little kind of valleys in the page that can start to show like whiteness peeking through. You want to press that graphite all the way into the paper and really get as dark as possible. Now, if it doesn't look really dark on the video, it's only because there's some glare. Graphite can be a little bit shiny. So now we have 2 measuring points. We have jet black, we've got the white of the page. So I'm going to try to go a step darker from white here, and I'm going to use the 2H pencil for that because that's our lightest pencil that we have in our sets. And then I'm going to try to go a step lighter than this black here. And for that, I'm actually going to jump all the way to a 2B just because I really don't want to over darken this just yet. We can always go darker. You can't undo it if you need to go lighter. So that's what I'm going to do next. On this 2H, be careful to barely lay any pressure on this. You're trying to go as light as possible. Side of the pencil. Okay, now this looks pretty dark on the video, but I promise it's quite a bit. It's significantly lighter than that black that we've got over here in the far side. The reason why I do that is I like to start to visualize and think about how many stair steps do I really need to jump to get to this kind of middle range here. Now we might have to alter those slightly. But the next thing I'm going to do is jump into this number 5, kind of mid-range gray. I'm going to go for an HB, but don't press too hard on this. Always start light and work your way darker. So I'm going to try to visualize what a good middle range, middle of the road would be, right between black and white. And notice I'm kind of using the broad side of the pencil like we've talked about, and I'm going different directions as I shade to kind of cover my tracks a little bit.
Okay.
That's not a bad starting point. Now what I'm going to do is stop talking too much and just let the video play, and I'm going to try to fill these in as best as I can to get a nice fluid flow with kind of generally similar type of stair steps up in value, so it never feels like I'm going way too dramatic from one square to another. I'm going to be using a combo of 2H and HB, probably mostly 2H, honestly, to fill in these. HB in the midtones, 2B anywhere up to 4B to get to these really dark tones. All right, guys. So not perfect by any means, but a pretty decent range and kind of flow between the light grays, kind of stair stepping into those darker tones. Keep in mind that with graphite, because of the nature of the beast, it does get shiny when you go darker, especially if the light is bouncing directly off of it. And because of the way I'm filming this, I have lights kind of shining down straight on my video or on my paper. So these lighter tones tend to, or sorry, darker tones tend to reflect the light quite a bit up at you. I hope that it'll be a little clearer when I go to do the charcoal, and you'll be able to see kind of the gradation a little bit better. But keep in mind that each one of these stair steps of gray kind of should be fairly significantly different from each other. So it should be pretty clear that 2 is overall darker than 1 but lighter than 3. 3 is darker than 2 but lighter than 4. So that's the way you're always going to try to compare these to each other. Doesn't have to be perfect, but take a little bit of time and try to get these nice. because if you can do this well, I guarantee you you'll be able to do it well when you're shading things like spheres and apples and getting into the really tougher subjects too. So now talking about the value scale, but in charcoal, a quick note about my charcoal pencils. So when we go from light, medium to dark, that's the equivalent of like hard lead in charcoal or hard charcoal, medium and soft charcoal. So the softer the charcoal, the darker we're going to be able to get with it. Now, some of your pencils, like General's brand, they'll be labeled hard, medium, or soft. Other ones might be labeled with Bs, 2B, 4B, 6B. So 2B, 4B, 6B would be the same equivalency as hard, medium, soft. So just like in pencils, the higher the number, the darker they're going to get in the B range. Okay, so one quick note about sharpening charcoal pencils because it's kind of tricky. Now, the harder the lead, the easier it is to sharpen. So if you notice, this is a hard pencil, and I was able to sharpen it with just a typical sharpener like this. And I generally don't have too much trouble because the charcoal is harder. That's quicker, it's easier to do, but the softer your charcoal pencils get, the more they tend to want to break off in these kind of sharpeners. Now, one thing I will note is that the sharpeners that come with your charcoal pencils, when you buy them in a set sometimes, a lot of times they have a different angle to the blade, and they'll sharpen better than, say, a typical pencil angle, like a graphite pencil. But if you run into this problem where you're unable to sharpen your pencils, what you can do, unable in your store-bought pencil sharpener, what you can do is whittle them down with a blade. So that's what I've done here. So typical X-Acto kind of knife like this, you would whittle away the wood first, slightly shave the charcoal itself, and then use sandpaper to kind of further sharpen and hone the pencil tip. This is kind of time consuming. It takes patience. You kind of feel like a sculptor when you're doing it, but there's no better way to get a sharp point on a soft pencil. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to do the same sort of thing that we did up here, but down on the charcoal. So I'm going to start with my darker pencil. Right now I've got like a 4B, and I'm going to go jet black first. All right, if you noticed when I'm going really dark, sometimes you kind of have to press that down into the paper with your finger or a blending tool just to really fill in all the little crevices with charcoal. So you can see that's jet black. It's darker than my graphite would go. Now I'm going to use a hard pencil, and this is tricky. I'm going to shade as lightly as I possibly can in this zone. Now, if you hold your pencil and barely press on the page, you'd be surprised how light you can get with a charcoal pencil. So practice that a little bit first before you just dive in. Now, another option is to have a little bit of this on your finger and kind of blur or smudge it somewhere. But to me, I almost have less control. If you notice, there's kind of a variety of marks because you got oils on your hands, and it's a little harder to control it. Now, if you've wiped a lot of that clean, I might be able to give myself a little bit of a tone here just with my finger to start off like a base tone. Now I'm going to use that edge of the charcoal pencil, lightest pressure I possibly can. The only pressure that's on the tip of this pencil is the weight of the pencil on the page. So I find that I can get just as much control with charcoal as I can with graphite. It's just a matter of hand like pressure sensitivity. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing we did here and guesstimate a midtone. All right, and then from there, it's going to be a matter of trying to blur and blend these together. Now, I might have to change some things a little bit, but let's see how this plays out when we go from the middle tone down to the dark and then up to the light. Definitely some cleaning up that I could do here. I was a little sloppy with it, as you can see, with the kind of blurred edges there. And that's a little bit of the nature of the beast with charcoal. It's always going to be a little bit on the messier side. Hopefully the details show up here, details in the dark. I know sometimes in the video it doesn't want to show those distinctions, but in person there's quite a bit of visible change between jet black and those medium grays. So hopefully that shows up here. But the main idea would be, can we control the medium enough to show gradual changes and slow fades between your lightest tones, mediums, medium dark, and then the darkest. And if you can get those kind of 9 to 10 big value shapes showing up in your drawings of simple objects and then the more complex still lives, the realism factor is going to keep kind of growing and increasing in the drawings.